Welcome to the Fixin Your Crown Boo podcast. It's a podcast to interview dope people in leadership who use the model of servant leadership and are driven by emotionally intelligent leadership frameworks and styles. They're also passionate about lifting others up to empower their success because the pie, it is big enough for all of us. And I believe we can all find a seat at the table. Your host today, my name is JD Johnson. I am a coach, consultant, and career strategist turned entrepreneur. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. Hey, Toronto. And I've been living and working in the Bay Area for the last 10 years. I have over 20 years of experience in a variety of industries, including manufacturing, telecommunications, customer experience, retail, CPG, and technology. And I've spent the last 8 years as a consultant with expertise in project and program management, as well as a little dessert of change management. My consulting career is where I discovered a passion for leadership development and emotionally intelligent driven leadership frameworks and styles. What I want to do with this podcast, with everything in my life, is I want to change the organizational culture landscape by transforming the relationship between employers, managers, and employees by addressing how new and emerging managers and leaders are prepared for the people side of leading teams. On that note, today I have with me my guest, Sangeetha Dikshit, and she is a ICF, ACC, and EQ-I 2.0 certified leadership coach and the founder of Pod Transformations. She specializes in empowering high potential leaders, especially those who feel overlooked or are navigating self-doubt, to lead with quiet confidence and authenticity. Drawing from her own journey, Sangeetha helps her clients uncover their innate leadership strengths, elevate executive presence, and take bold, aligned action in today's evolving workplace. Though one-on-one coaching and leadership development programs, she partners with individuals and organizations to cultivate future-ready leadership grounded in self-trust, adaptability, and purpose. Her approach integrates evidence-based tools like EQ assessments with grounded, insight-driven coaching to foster sustainable transformation and resilient, authentic leadership. Sangeetha is equally passionate about equipping emerging and mid-level leaders with the emotional intelligence and human-centered leadership capabilities required to thrive and lead impactfully in today's complex, fast-changing business environment. Furthermore, she brings a strong track record of partnering with global organizations such as Amazon, Citibank, Fidelity Investments, Bosch, Schneider Electric, just to name a few. Prior to founding Pod Transformations, her work spans psychometric assessments, training designs and facilitation, and transformational coaching. She's delivering measurable outcomes in leadership effectiveness, team dynamics, and workplace culture. Welcome, Sangeetha.
Thank you, JD. That was a beautiful introduction of yourself as well as me. Thank you. Happy and excited to be here.
You're welcome. Is there anything I missed that you want to tack on to your intro?
No, you covered almost everything, including my certifications and my work. I'm good. It's all good.
Awesome. Let's kick this off. I'd like to pop in a couple of cool, interesting questions. So I'm curious, do you have a quote or a saying or a mantra that you love, you want to share?
Absolutely. There's so many of them that really pops in my head, but one of my favorite quotes is, your emotions are a window to your thoughts. I heard this, I'm not sure who came up with this quote, but I heard this from a mentor many years ago who essentially said, if you ever know what you're thinking, pause and reflect on how you're feeling and guide you to your thoughts.
Oh, I love that. What makes this powerful for you?
We are always in a rush to fix things, to get results, to accomplish and do whatever we do without pausing to understand how are we feeling at this moment? How did the situation affect us? It could be a positive or a negative one, or maybe a neutral response, but it's important to navigate within to know how we feel, to understand what are those thoughts. So that way we move from reaction to response. And that's what I'm passionate about in helping people, regardless whether I'm coaching or even in a casual setting, and having these conversations with my folks to help them acknowledge that your emotions are important.
That resonates with me. I feel my personal belief system is that resonates around how emotions are natural. They cue us in to the world. They cue us into, can be flight or flight, but they cue us into how do we maneuver through this world. And I feel like they get a really bad rep, or emotions are bad. But just as we're talking about that quote, emotions are key to tell us what's going on within us. But we also need to be able to move from, as you said, reaction, proactive action, and regulate our emotions and be well aware, self-aware of how our emotions trigger us, how we move through this world, what they're going to make us do if we just react, and be able to take, like you said, that pause to say, oh, I'm feeling this. It's okay. Maybe if I have the time, I can wallow in this emotion and figure out what I need to do to move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Good start to this conversation. You mentioned a little bit in your intro about the things that you're passionate about, especially around your quote. And I'm curious, what is something that you are truly passionate about personally?
One of the keys, again, as we evolve and as we mature, I guess passions and interests also evolve accordingly. But one thing that's been a permanent passion for me ever since I was even a teenager is to make others feel empowered, to help them understand and realize that they have the power within themselves to accomplish whatever they want. And that's where, even before I turn into coaching, I would always look for conversations and in-depth conversations, in fact, to help. And even before helping, it's to understand what drives someone else. What are their motivations? What is it that's stopping them from doing what they want to be? And that's where the biggest challenge is for so many of us, where we are constantly driven by the external factors of what the society tells us, or how does the external environment want us to behave or to act or to decide. And that's where my work, even before assuming the formal word coach, started in terms of empowering people. And that's something that I don't think will ever change. So even though there's many other things that have evolved, this one aspect has gotten stronger.
I love that. Everything you said, our conversations together, thanks, Bhumika, for introducing us. Everything you said talks to the idea of empowering others. And another key thing that you said that resonates with how I like to move through the world. And if you've ever done anything change management, they always talk about the WIFM. What's in it for me? What is, when you're making a transformation, when you are trying to get a project from one end to the other and implementing that with people, it's key to be clear on what's in it for the people who are adopting this change. And that's something that we as organizations can sometimes forget, that in order to truly move the needle, everything is done for people, by people, with people. And if you're making a change, if you want to change personally, you need to think through what is that person that you're working with, or the people that you're working with, what is their wisdom? Because that is the key to motivation and helping them empower themselves.
Absolutely. And I always, in many of my training interventions, I always talk about, as leaders or in leadership change management, it could be any of these big words that we always see, but we are working with fellow humans. We are not dealing with systems and processes which can be fixed, which probably doesn't need the sensitivity and mindfulness compared to what it takes to work with a fellow human. How do you make them feel? And how do you ensure that work happens? There are results still driven, but at the same time, are we as leaders taking care of our team and ourselves? It's a two-way street. I've met leaders who ignore their own emotional well-being, or they're not aware of how their behavior is coming across. And that's where EQ components help in terms of bringing in your self-awareness or self-perception. Those are important to know, or even decision-making. How are you making decisions, given especially now with the economical climate that we are in, the workspace environment changing so much? How are leaders making those decisions? And is there a thought given to someone's, to not the processes, but also to fellow human beings?
Understandable. I think what really resonates for me around the fact that we're talking about we are all human beings. A business is selling to human beings or servicing human beings. The people within the organization are human beings. So it's important to never forget the people factor. And I get it. Organizations, if they ain't making money, they can't remain in business for very long. So yes, your bottom line profit be a key consideration, but the human factor, I feel, is equally as important.
Absolutely.
And so as we're talking about the human factor, I would love to dig into, what does leadership mean to you?
Great question. Leadership, to me, it's not in the title. It's not about what you put on your LinkedIn bio, which is great. We all like to have certain association or an identity. Yes, that's great. But leadership is far more of how you are from within, in terms of, are you someone who looks at your team, your peers, it could be, or it could be someone who got hired and you're probably coaching them. Are you really someone who empowers other folks, your team, your staff? Are you someone who is able to coach these people to become the best at what they are? Which means identifying each person's unique capabilities and their skills and helping them sharpen that. How are you as a leader, or as someone who is not a leader by title, but has leadership qualities? Are you doing that work in terms of identifying people's strengths and empowering them with resources, with proper guidance to be the best and to thrive in what they do? And that also comes with a sense of security and the assurance about yourself, about your own skills. And you're not worrying about empowering someone else, thinking, what if this person leaves my team tomorrow? It doesn't resonate when we approach this with any insecurity. So this is something for me very important to know. And as you said, JD, at the start, the pie is big enough for everyone. Having a space for yourself to be sure that you are capable of your own skill sets. You bring in your own uniqueness, but at the same time, it's okay and it's great if you're able to empower your team members, your colleagues to do well for themselves. And it pays off in many other ways.
I love that. I think you really plugged into a lot of key aspects of what I think leadership is as well. And it all boils down to, how do you empower your team to be their best? And in empowering your team to be their best, that then empowers the company and the organizational mission, because people operate great when they feel psychological safety. And that means they feel that their leader is behind them and has their back. And when they understand the organization mission and goals tying back to what they are doing on the day-to-day. And then when you connect that with, I'm being helped to be my best person, people thrive in environments like that. And it's good for everyone.
Absolutely.
As you're talking about what leadership means to you and empowering people, I'm curious, how would you describe your communication style?
With the way I prefer to communicate with my team, with my colleagues, is first and foremost with empathy. And it's super important. And this is a common feedback that I've heard from many of them, that we are so busy with everything that's happening around us, that how many people hold the space to listen, without having the need to jump in to give advices or an advice or a suggestion or a judgment or any of these, but be there and listen and say, hey, I understand. That's one of my crux of what makes me who I am. And also, I love to have an open, honest communication. People sometimes can get afraid of feedback, for example, or they worry about what's going to be told if I were to open these doors to have an open communication. Am I going to get judged? So there's a ton of fear our mind presents to us. But over the years, for me, I've learned to be open to every conversation, and I then choose what do I want to work on. Having an honest conversation and an open communication helps people feel safe. And that's something that you also brought in, JD, and I resonate with that. Having a space or rather creating a space of psychological safety by sharing that the space is an open space to have conversations and it's safe, confidentiality probably as and when required. I guess that's something that I resonate with, and I practice that on a intricate level with folks around me.
Oh, I love all of that. One thing that you tapped into that hit me is the idea of how does that person you're speaking to want you to listen? And by that, I'm a problem solver. I'm a project manager, program manager. So when this is happening and you tell me the situation, oh, yeah, let's solve this problem. And oh, you can do this. But it took me years to be like, wait, hold on. Sometimes people just want to rant. They don't want someone to solve the problem or even co-collaborate with them to solve a problem. They need someone to listen. They need someone to maybe be that shoulder or that rant. And sometimes when I get into my problem solving mode, I have to be like, whoa, hold on. What are you looking for today? Because I can do it either which way. I need to set my mind so that I am in listener mode, or we can be in let's co-create problem solving mode. What do you need today?
Absolutely. And that's something that I have started following since the last few years now, where let's say a colleague approaches me with a situation, I'm open and I ask them, hey, do you want me to wear the problem-solving hat, or do you want me to be your colleague, or do you want me to be a friend and listen to you? What's the mode you want me to be in? And I also ask them if they need help, because as much as we love helping each other out, sometimes they're not looking for that help. They want to vent out, as you said, and they need a space where there's someone who can listen to them. And I've also asking your people, how can I help? Do you need help? So those open doors to have a more open conversation, saying whether they want support in terms of a solution or do they want support in terms of someone to listen to them. And that makes a huge difference. And it has, in my experience. And I've had multiple colleagues, as well as my clients, give a feedback saying, hey, thank you for asking these questions because I know how to communicate now in terms of whether I am venting out or is it more in-depth problem-solving conversation that they wish to have with me. That helps.
It makes such a big difference. And we talked earlier in your intro that you're ICF ACC certified, and I'm in the process right now of getting my certification. And I think that's also something that shifted for me, is ICF definitely has a particular way of how they think about coaching. And one of the big pieces is all about listening, paraphrasing, and asking questions.
Absolutely. It's more about allowing especially in a coaching space, allowing your client to get into their own solution mode. And as coaches or as leaders, if let's say you're coaching your team, you're not jumping into advice. That's a major block, I feel, because that way we are not allowing this person or these people within the team to think for themselves, to feel empowered and come up with solutions that works for them. And essentially helping them realize that they own the steering wheel of their life or their career. We are there as GPS systems. That's how I like to put that. We are there to guide. We are there to tell you, hey, there's a roadblock there probably. What do you need to do? Do you want to reroute? Do you want to turn back? What's the solution there? But essentially, they are in the driver's seat and they drive. And that's the crux of ICF level of coaching. And I agree with you, JD. When I did my certification, and now that I've been practicing the ICF standards in my coaching practice, it's been a game changer because people feel far more empowered because they come up with their solutions. They're able to think things through and have a space where they feel heard. Because many times it's not about someone else listening to you. In many cases, I've had clients who say, hey, Sangeetha, thank you for asking that question. I wanted to listen to those words. I just wanted to hear those words for myself. And I'm glad that I got that space. It does change. And I'm glad that you're doing your ICF certification, JD. Good luck on that. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Yes, I've been almost a year now that I've been working through it.
Awesome.
And what's cool about it, and just like you were talking about empowerment, is the idea of when you say back or connect threads to them in their conversation, in a coaching conversation, they're like, oh, yeah, you turn it right back to them. And I think that is one of the things, I saw a post of yours not too long ago, all around how leadership, some of the mistakes that leadership make and not being coached is one of them. And I think part of the art and the science of leadership is it's hard because it's moving between, there's a coaching, there's mentoring, there's vision, there's a different modes you need to turn on and turn off based on the situation. And part of being a good leader is knowing when to flex into the right role with the right person or the right group.
Absolutely, I agree. And there is still a lack of awareness in terms of the difference between coaching versus mentorship. Many times I've had conversations with my clients where they walk in thinking, hey, I'm going to get all these resources. I'm going to get hands-on support, which is still important. Don't get me wrong. Mentorship is equally important. I still mentor as a volunteer with multiple nonprofits where there is more hands-on support given, which is equally important even at a workplace. And as you mentioned, for a leader, it's important to know what hat you're wearing. Are you going to be wearing a coaching hat, which means you're allowing them, your team, your staff, employee to take the wheel and take control while you act as a GPS? Or do you want to be the person who says, hey, I'm going to also hold on to your steering wheel. I'm going to be more hands-on and provide those resources and be more involved in that sense. And it's important to know the difference between these two for not for people who are looking for such support, also for leaders within organizations to know what kind of support is the team looking for.
Absolutely. And I feel when I'm doing my coaching session, ICF is so clear. And I'm at the very beginning when we're starting our call, I'm always like, this isn't consulting. This isn't mentoring. This isn't advising. It's not therapy. Coaching is collaborative and facilitative when we're thinking about it through the ICF lens. Because there are other modes of coaching out there. We don't want to say that they're bad, but when you're thinking through a ICF coaching lens, that's how they're looking at it. And that has to be clearly set up at the beginning. And I think that leaders could use that as well to, even if they don't say it out loud, but to navigate within their own minds. Okay, this is a coaching moment. There's a saying that came up to me, I don't know if it's a parable. I have no clue who said it. But if you fish for a man, you feed him for a day. But if you teach the man to fish, he feeds himself for a lifetime.
Exactly. Beautifully put. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's cool how coaching and communication have really pulled out your, I'm going to say, superpowers. So I feel like when we were talking about this, one of your superpowers is leaning in with empathy, listening well, and knowing which hat to put on for the right moment. And I'm curious, how do you feel about that being your superpower?
I absolutely love those superpowers. I guess leading with empathy or knowing how do you want to make your team feel empowered, supported, safe. Those are important. And I think that starts with self-awareness. because when you do not know yet what triggers you or what is it that you're carrying from whatever that may have happened previously into a meeting. Let's say you were driving to work and Starbucks gave you a wrong cup of coffee. You didn't order for that. You're now upset and you walk in and the first thing you have is a meeting. How is that situation from the past? I know it sounds silly in many ways. It's coffee, but hey, a lot of us need a proper cup of coffee. And how are you bringing those emotions into a meeting? Let's say you have a feedback session with your team or with one of the team members. Are you really aware of those triggers? And that's a superpower, because the moment you're aware, and I want to say I read this or heard this during my emotional intelligence certification course, that it's important that you name your emotions. And to name it, you have to recognize what's happening within you. And I guess that comes with introspection and taking a moment to reflect and say, hey, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this? Do I need to address it right away, or can I park it aside and revisit it when required, or maybe whenever there's time to essentially address that? So that is the crux of your superpower, which branches out into many other ways of how you then deal with multiple situations throughout the day, at work, off work, within yourself as well. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. I think self-awareness is so key to being able to move into that next mode of self-regulation. Because when you identify your feelings, when you identify what triggered those feelings, why you're feeling that way, you are much more empowered for yourself to be able to not react and act with purpose. So I love that. And I love that from everything you said in your coaching conversations, it sounds like you strive to pull that out of your clients and help them deep dive into who they are and their emotional awareness and emotional self-regulation.
Absolutely. For me, I guess it's a part of an introverted personality. I'm not sure, but having those deep dive into oneself and asking tough questions. And this is something that I guess as leaders and as well as clients or team members, when we are in a coaching conversation, let's not shy away from asking difficult questions, because that's where it triggers our series of introspection and looking at, okay, what's affecting my skills? Because what you see outside, it's like an iceberg, right? So you see the behavior, you probably see the attitude, you see the reaction. But what is driving those things is essentially those triggers from within, those underlying conversations that we have within ourselves. And they're important, and to take a step back and address those. And I guess in a way, as a coach or as a leader, if you're in a coaching mode, you're essentially holding a mirror to them and saying, hey, I'm asking you questions. This may not be something that you like at this point, but this is what it is that you are seeing within yourself. How do you want to address that?
Absolutely. And I think, I'm going to take us back a little bit to something you said earlier, is as you're leaning into empathy and leaning into these difficult conversations, I'm just curious around, how do you feel or deal with taking and giving feedback? What is some of the hardest to hear but best received feedback you've ever gotten?
Yep. I guess just like any other fellow human, I am very conscious especially when it comes to a feedback, because yes, who wants to listen to those critical feedback? We want to, but it's harder to accept. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. At least initially, it's hard to accept. I guess for me, when someone talks about a feedback and it's not a constructive feedback, or at least there's no nuances around taking care of someone's emotions. And I've had conversations where people say, hey, I'm just being frank with you. I'm being honest, and I'm just telling you these things, which is great. I love honest conversations. But words can still affect, it can scar you. So how do you provide those constructive feedback? By specifying that one particular behavior or maybe a specific task that needs improvement, that can change the whole game, instead of putting a very generic or a blanket feedback saying, hey, you did this, or this is something that I don't like about what happened, and not being specific and not caring about how someone might feel, right? And that's important when, regardless of what kind of a feedback that we want to share, in terms of, are you being specific about that one instance or a specific behavior, a specific task, a project, and how is it being presented? So are you also giving them tools to maybe improve? So I've had difficulties where my emotions weren't considered, all in the name of being frank and being honest. And now I have those feedback, but I don't know where to look for help, or I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, because it's not communicated to me. When someone says, hey, Sangeetha, you got to improve on this, but then also help me understand, how do I do it? I'm not asking, I don't mean hand-holding, but at least some sort of a guidance. And that's why I keep going back to the GPS example, saying, maybe you need to look at these resources. Take a look at it. I've also had those kind of leaders. I've been very lucky to have worked under amazing leaders where those critical feedback were given, or constructive feedback was given, along with, I have these resources that you can probably look into. If you need help, Sangeetha, come back. And I think that's a beautiful blend of helping you identify where you need to improve and how do you go about doing that. And I guess that's where it's been in terms of feedback for me.
I can totally relate. I think feedback, because it's often critical, even if it's meant to be constructive, can be hard to hear. I remember listening to, I think it was a leadership class I did some couple of years ago, and they had us listen to some podcast or YouTube videos around feedback. But the one that struck me the most was around feedback is a gift. It might feel like a sucky gift, but feedback is a gift because someone has taken the time to let you know how they perceive you, or they've perceived a behavior, or they've perceived an action or a task. And that, in combination with the emotional awareness of, oh, this feels crappy, and because it's a gift, don't defend, take it in. Absolutely. Sit back, take it off to the side. There's this book, there's a group, and they call themselves Crucial Conversations. And they talk about being able to take that feedback away and let yourself sit with it and think through it, and don't react to it in the moment, because the emotion is high. Because our human, it's almost like it's the flight response. When we hear something critical, human nature typically tends to want to defend or lash out or run away. And so taking it away and even saying, you know what, thank you so much for this feedback. I need a little bit of time to digest on it. I'm still working on doing that part, by the way, and saying that very clearly. Taking the time, I need time to take the time and digest it and think through it and not respond to it in the moment, because that's when you're feeling it's a little bit of a sucker punch, right? Oh, reframing it as feedback is a gift is something that when I take it away, I feel like it's a gift. It's a little bit of a Usal moment. It's a gift. There's good in this. Let's find the good. Let's find the thing I can figure out to action on this feedback. But that being fair, not all feedback is given in a constructive way or in a way that gives you actionable feedback. And I think that's something I'm learning to do for myself, is what is the actionable piece on this feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you do with the feedback?
Exactly. And I think also there's a key thing is that you can take that feedback in, but also remember that it is a perception. It may be correct, may be misguided, may be taken out of context. So you also get to choose what you do with that feedback.
Absolutely. That's totally in our control, always.
Absolutely. And so what do you find the hardest? Is it the not taking your emotion into account when you give feedback? Or you also mentioned, like, what do I do with this? What's the actionable piece of this?
I guess those two largely in my experience where, let's say, I'm not even allowed time to process my emotions. And that's important, JD. You brought out that beautifully, because having difficult conversations and you're hearing all these things from, say, your leader or someone in authority, but you have so much to talk about, and you're probably looking at how do you defend yourself, and that's a very natural state that our body gets into: flight, fight, or sometimes freeze mode. But for me personally, I would love if I'm also given an opportunity to talk about it and have a conversation and let it be a two-way conversation. And the action piece, as I mentioned, as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, in the sense of, what do I do with this piece of information? So I don't know. Now I'm emotional. On top of it, I have no idea, what do I do with this? And that's just going to not work in the favor. I've had conversations, as I mentioned earlier, where I've been very lucky to have worked with some amazing leaders where these two aspects worked well. And I guess the third aspect also, that now that I remember and as I reflect, sharing my experience in terms of constructive feedback, is more from the space where they reach out after giving you that feedback, right? Maybe the next day or maybe in a couple of days to have a gentle check-in. Hey, how are you doing? And I guess that's another missing piece, because we think that it's not important, but it actually makes you stand out, especially after a difficult conversation, to show that you care. The other aspect of leadership, that you care about your team, about that person that you are giving this feedback to.
Absolutely. One thing that strikes me around this giving and receiving feedback is, what is the mental state that you're in at that moment? You were talking about the emotions that you feel after you get the feedback, but what about the emotions before the feedback? Have you set up this conversation to be productive? What I loved was you also talked about the carrying of the emotions. And I have to say that's something that I realized that I naturally do. When I remember a point in time, I was in a meeting or preparing for a meeting, and I'd already had one with the stakeholders that I was going to meet with. And based on how that meeting went and the personalities in that meeting, I remember thinking to myself, okay, yes, a person hasn't done what we asked them to do in this last meeting, and we're coming up to this next meeting, but I don't want to go in and do it as a blame. I don't want to be a point fingers. I want to be cognizant of the fact they had something to do for us and it's important and it's holding us back in X area, but I want it to be more collaborative, and I don't want to feel like, oh, you didn't do this thing. And I don't want to do this in front of the boss, right, where I'm pointing fingers. And I got advice, you need to point this finger hard. And based on the personalities, because you weren't in that call, I want to be cognizant of how I approach it. It's not about being fearful of approaching this conversation, but I'm cognizant of the personalities in the room. I'm cognizant of your bosses in the room and some other high power players are in the room. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. How do I balance? I need you to do ish for me, but I also don't want to throw you under the bus in front of these people. That's a key point of when you're giving feedback or even when you're asking for things. A piece of advice that always stuck with me is you win more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Absolutely.
So I always have this in mind, is when I'm giving feedback or when I'm asking for things, I'm not throwing people under the bus. I'm cognizant of who's in the room, how what I say might come off, how you might perceive it. Because when you go into a defensive mode, what I've seen for myself, what I've seen in my lifetime is you get defensive and you stop listening. And I don't want you to stop listening.
I agree.
This has been awesome, Sangeetha, because I know we're heading into our time. One of the things I'd like to do is ask a fun question, because we got all serious and deep. Are there any fun facts about yourself or your leadership that you want to share before we sign off?
Absolutely. One of them is, I'm often mistaken for an extrovert. When people talk to me and like, hey, I thought, and when I mentioned that, hey, I'm actually an introverted person, they don't believe me. They're surprised, but I've learned to be good at social camouflage. My work also, because I deal with whether it's keynote speaking or training programs or coaching, it's reaching out and being there. As much as I may come across as an extroverted person, I'm introverted. My family would know, my partner would know. He always says that, oh my goodness, how are you such an introvert? It's a fun conversation we have, but that's one of the fun facts. And apart from work, we usually focus so much about talking about what we do at work and identifying ourselves with our work. It's still a learning for me to say my work doesn't define me. What I enjoy other than coaching clients or having these training interventions or speaker sessions is I love gardening. Many times I draw out life lessons tending to my plants. I have conversations with them. I know I sound crazy, but they do bring out a piece within me to reflect on how nature and how the universe is. And it gives that space for me to reflect and draw out life lessons. That's how it's been for me. I nerd out. The final one is I nerd out on conversations that involves anything that's deeper in terms of spirituality, psychology, cosmos, the universe. Those are some fun facts that it'll be great to share here.
Love it. I'm curious. Have you always known you're an introvert? Or is that something that you developed deeper along the way? You don't get any energy from social activities, engaging with multiple people?
I've always, maybe I didn't know the label to it, and I don't agree with labels when it comes to introversion. And I guess there's a misconception of what an introverted person is, because they think all introverted people are antisocial. They don't want to meet anyone. But that's not the truth. I do get energized, and I'm sure fellow introverted people listening here to this podcast will be able to relate with. I get energized with deep conversations. I can go on for hours, and with smaller groups. As much as I still go to networking events, I love smaller groups. That's where I came up with the name Pod Transformations for my company, because it's about having that smaller pod, a small group of community, and having deeper conversations and bringing transformation at a much deeper level. I still love people. I still go to these networking events, but what drains me out is having too many surface level conversations. Small talk without an intention or without a deeper connection can drain out my energy. But having said that, we live in a society where we need to be inclusive of everyone. I've learned that skill of being an extrovert, but I always come back to my shell and re-energize there.
That is fair. I ask because I get the same thing. I won't say that I'm an introvert. I say I'm an ambivert, because I do get energy from the whole gamut, but there's a point where I need to be by myself. I don't want to talk to nobody. I want to read my little book and not think about things. I get that. And that surprises people that I am as equal an introvert as I am an extrovert.
I think that's great insight. And for folks who might be interested, maybe you could look it up, an MBTI assessment, and there are free assessment tools out there. You can take up an MBTI assessment if you haven't already.
Thank you, Sangeetha, so much for being a part of this podcast. I appreciate you being a guest. And this was a phenomenal conversation.
Thank you, JD. It was amazing speaking with you. And thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast. I can't wait to listen to this and the other guests, amazing guests that you're bringing in.
Thank you. So I just want to give one opportunity. Where can we find you on the socials?
I am currently active on LinkedIn. Look me up on Sangeetha Dikshit and you'll find me there. Feel free to message me and we could meet up for a coffee chat, or you follow my content. I've started to post regularly, which I'm happy and proud of. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Know the struggle. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. You can find me on my socials. I'm on LinkedIn underneath Jade Johnson, Jayde. Johnson. And you can find me on Instagram, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Facebook, and anywhere else on the web by going by J Squared Elevate Consulting. Thanks as we wrap up. Have a phenomenal rest of your day, Sangeetha. And everyone else, look out for the next episode.